Progressive Business Executive Education would like to welcome you to today's program, Copywriting Workshop, Improve SEO, Boost Conversions, and Measure Success. My name is Andrea and I will be your moderator for today's program. Today's event is 60 minutes in length. There will be a 45-minute presentation followed by a 15-minute question and answer session. The entire program is being recorded and can be purchased at an attendee discount. If you have any questions during the event, you can communicate with me through the chat box in the bottom left corner of your screen. We ask that if you lose the stream or have audio issues throughout this event, to please select the red X in the upper right corner and then refresh the interface. The materials packet can be found within the Documents portion of this window and includes a copy of the instructor's presentation. Please remember that it is a violation of our copyright to record the training. Now I would like to introduce your speaker, Tina Arnoldi.
Okay, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are calling from. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'll be talking to you about your copywriting, writing for the web, getting found, and measuring how you're doing. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to run through the slides first, and then depending if we have some time at the end, I'll go into some of the different tools that I'm going to mention along the way. So this is me. There's all sorts of ways to find me online. As I point out, my YouTube channel, I'm not one of those fun people. It's more like analytics and AdWords and that kind of stuff. So my channel is probably good for insomniacs. But just so you know, I've got some additional tutorials there if that's helpful for you. So this is just kind of a fun way to start about when we're talking about marketing and writing is kind of, we're doing the same stuff day in, day out, and it's what do we do? What's the right strategy? Sometimes it's just easier to say, well, I want to do what this other guy is doing, or let's do what we've always been doing. And copywriting especially can kind of be a tough place to try to keep up with all of that. So let's go ahead, and I do have some questions I like to ask just to kind of get some engagement from people. So if you would take a second in your chat box and just go ahead and note on there some things that you think of when you think of content. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's just I'll kind of watch the answers as they come in here, but I like to see how people think about it, and then it also helps me sometimes you can learn things from each other. So if you want to just take a minute and type some things in there just about what content is for you. I'll take a minute, see if we've got some things coming in. So I'll give you just a second here and we'll keep going. Okay, this is great. Yep, words, pictures, graphics, social media. One person said absolutely. And pictures, glad you said that, because when you think of copywriting, you're thinking of writing, but of course pictures are now becoming, really a big deal. And you'll find when we talk about our different social media channels, you'll find that it's very important. So this reiterates some of the responses that I had in here, the different ways, the blogs, again, the images. Another interesting way with content would be interviews. One thing I'll say that I really like, if you're doing an interview and posting it on your blog or article, sometimes you'll kind of get a 2-for-1, meaning that you're putting this content on your site, but you find that the person that you're interviewing, they may also spread it out as well. What I like about quizzes is that you're also getting information about your readers, so if you're kind of stumped of, oh geez, I don't know what we want to write about or what are people really interested in, with a quiz you can gather that information. And of course you have the white papers, event summaries. What I mean by an event summary is that I've followed these occasionally. If there is a conference on something with digital marketing and I'm not able to attend, it's a big conference, there's a lot of people at it, a lot of activity, and just people that I would like to learn from. I've found on different websites that people are writing a summary of the event. So just, different ways to think about content beyond just writing the words. And then of course the why bother, right? So we kind of, probably have a good idea of why we do need to bother with this. But what I want you to think about here is to kind of think, and we'll talk about kind of the customer pipeline, but why you would bother, of course, starting with the education piece. Someone has never heard of you, they've never heard of your product, you've got this great new innovative service or something that you're offering. So in those cases, you need to start by educating people. So that's your piece where you're going to start with the education. Of course, ultimately, you want to be bringing people, in to be potential customers. So you've got your lead generation. You've got content when it comes to customer service. It would be great if people can find out what they need on an FAQ site rather than having to call you quite as often. So it's not just a one thing to think of. It's just putting stuff out there, but you're thinking of people in different ways depending on where they are in the purchasing cycle. So, and this is just a great quote. I love saying that it's a strategic marketing approach. The strategic part is great because I think a lot of us, we're so busy with other things that we just sometimes may throw stuff out there and see what sticks. And I'll be honest, and that's what I've done at times with my content. But you're creating it, you're distributing it. The key things here, of course, is the relevant, consistent. So if you're going to send out an email newsletter, and you do it every week, and then you go every month, and then you go every day, and then you go every quarter, the audience doesn't really know what to expect from you. So that's another important consideration. So I want to start, with content, of course, a big part of it is the SEO. So SEO is your search engine optimization. It's getting found on those organic results on google.com. I say getting found in the free results, but it's not really free. You're working, anybody who has this as part of your job, you're working really hard to get found on there. But that's a big piece of what you're doing with your content in the beginning stages, to get people interested in what you're offering is where we're talking about the SEO, right? So they find you organically. They may not even have known they needed you, but that's where they start maybe the education process and then look into what you have to offer. So Google algorithms, the couple that I'm going to show you or just kind of highlight, these are a little bit older and Google constantly has algorithms coming out there, but these ones are pretty, I think these are the ones that have kind of stood out recently. So, and you may be familiar with some of these terms, panda, penguin, hummingbird. But the Panda is when it was getting, several years ago, but talking more about content, right? So it's looking at sites that have the in-depth content, updated content, and kind of steering away from the sites that just have too much advertising. So if a site has a lot of advertising, it's hard to navigate. Google's kind of saying, we don't want to give them quite as much credit. The other one, Penguin, was another one I think was big because this is when we got into the link building. So when you put out content, unfortunately, link building is still kind of important for SEO, and I think it's one of the most parts of my job that I don't like, one of those parts that I like the least, because you still want to have quality links to your site, because when you have a quality link to your site, you're saying to Google, hey, other people think we're important. We're not just telling you we're important, but other people think we're important. So that can, that can give you some weight. I still see people are trying to build links. So I see this a lot on my website. I have so many spam comments that I just throw away. And you know what I mean by a spam comment. Hey, great information. Thanks for writing this. Come check us out at, and then insert spammy link there. So it's really about having those quality links. The other one two things I want to mention here, but the other one, Hummingbird, was a little more recent and still a couple years, but a more recent where Google's looking into, that the whole query that somebody types in, the whole sentence, that they're taking that into account and not just the words. The reason this one came about is because another issue with content would be keyword stuffing. And that would be if I wrote a piece of content and I just tried to get a keyword in there 20 times, so Google's kind of catching up to some of that sneaky stuff. And then, of course, the most recent one that I think is big is just mobile friendly. If you're not sure if your website is mobile friendly, and it sounds like I'm getting off track a little bit, but you want to have mobile friendly because if you have content on there and it's not mobile friendly, people can't absorb it. And mobile use is just rising higher and higher, and sometimes more searches are really actually happening more on a mobile than on a desktop. If you're not sure about your website, so this kind of gets into more technical things, but I want to just toss out, Google has a tool, it's just called Mobile Friendly Test. So I don't have the exact URL, and in the interest of time, I won't get into that today, but if you do a search on Google's Mobile Friendly Test, you'll see a chance to put in the URL of your website to see how mobile friendly it is. So I would encourage you to do that as kind of a starting point to see how you're doing mobile-wise with your website. Okay, so the keyword. The keywords are important whether you are doing, we're just talking about SEO, the content, or if it's paid, so we're really kind of getting into the organic stuff today, but you also have, AdWords, Bing, all these different opportunities where you can do paid advertising. So the things that you would want to think about is the keyword phrase is the keywords that you want to rank for. So if you are saying, okay, well, we want to get some content on there because we want to show up organically for the word webinar. Okay, so that's really broad. So that would be a tough one to rank for. But what's a keyword variant? Okay, so maybe it could be webinar, it could be online class, internet-based training, or so there's different words in your writing that you would want to look at different variations on what you want to include and what you put out there as content. And then, of course, the related words. So it's the words that, again, like webinar versus training versus class. So you want to think of different ways to use your keywords, especially when you're writing that you're putting kind of a variety of content out there. So keyword discovery. So how do you figure out which keywords that you should even use? I say test them with paid search. Now, of course, that's what Google wants you to do. They want you to go to AdWords and spend buckets of money. And what I've seen, sometimes AdWords does well for clients. I have other clients it doesn't do great for. But the reason I include that in here is because you can do a small paid campaign and kind of see what's getting people's attention. So you're looking at your wording, or perhaps you're looking at the headline in an AdWords ad, and that's a headline that you'll be able to use in your content. So that's why you can maybe play around with that a little bit. You can check SEO in Google Analytics, and this is one I'm hoping to have time to show you at the end. Google has a tool. It used to be called Google Webmaster Tools, and it's now called Google Search Console. And what that does is it lets you see the actual keywords that people typed in order to get to your website. Now, in the past, you would be able to see those keywords in Google Analytics, but then Google started hiding those as secure search, but you can get those still in Search Console. The reason that matters is when you look at the words that people are typing that's eventually bringing them to your website, then that gives you some ideas for the content that you might want to include because you know it's of interest. Thinking narrow. So I gave the example webinar, right? Ranking for webinar would be pretty difficult. But like today, if it was ranking for a copywriting and SEO webinar, right? So that's those long, when you hear long tail, when you get more narrow in your thinking, that you're going to have, fewer people are going to respond, but they're going to be more relevant. Now, the Google Keyword Planner, this is another one. So with Google AdWords, Google has a tool called the Keyword Planner. You do not have to be running paid campaigns on AdWords to use it. So what you can do if you're not using AdWords, you have no interest in it, what you can do is set up an AdWords account, not actually run any ad campaigns, but this gives you access to the Google Keyword Planner. And so again, I want to show you that today too, just so you know, and that's another tool for you to get some of that keyword research when you're deciding what to write on. This screenshot, this just shows you, and you would see this if you are using Google Analytics, and if you're not, that's absolutely a must. Definitely need to have Google Analytics to monitor your performance. But when you have the Search Console set up, right, so you're looking at Search Console, looking at those keywords, and you connect that to Analytics, this is what you would see, that you would see the words that are bringing people to your website in Google Analytics. So again, it's almost like having that keyword data we used to be able to get in Analytics, except now you get to it from the search engine optimization, and then you can see queries. So this list here, these are words that people typed to get to a website. Okay, and then again, the keyword planner, which hopefully I'll have time to show you today. But again, if you go to AdWords, set up an account, don't run anything in it. But when you do the keyword planner, this lets you do a few different ways to look at your keywords. You're searching for new words, or you're just getting a volume. So I'm typing in maybe webinar versus online class and seeing kind of what the search trends are there. Okay, again, I'm going to hold the demos until the end, partially with time, and then so I'm just not switching back and forth. But you have these for reference in case we don't get to them today. This one I happen to think is probably one of the most important screens you're going to see here, because this is showing you what, in terms of using keywords in your writing, this is what shows up. This is a sample of a search results screen. So if I were to type, so let's say this one I was looking for, I did a Google search on, what is this, Andromeda Galaxy, I'm probably slaughtering the name, but you can see that it shows those keywords. It's showing a description that includes the keywords. Is it recent or is it an older one? So this is the kind of thing that when you're writing, in a way you're writing for Google, because Google needs to think what you're writing is important and valuable. But what you're also doing, you're also writing obviously for people. And how something comes up in a search results screen is going to have an impact on whether or not people are going to click on it. And again, you need to have fresher content to be able to be more inclined to show up in search results. Google tends to kind of favor that frequent, relevant, and recent content. And then just another one, and this just kind of reinforces what I was saying as far as engines versus people. So engines, is it quality? Content, is it unique? Do we have keywords? And then for people, is it they're having a click-through rate? Click-through rate is a term for AdWords, but it's also for your search results. So if you're showing up in organic search results 100 times and people maybe only click once or twice, then maybe your description isn't appealing enough for people to click through. I will just mention to this term here, short versus long click. So long click is what Google's kind of looking at they're tracking results for queries that were selected by searchers that resulted in a long visit, right? So did I come on your site and hang out there for a while and look around for what I need? Or did I come on your site and immediate leave? And so that's what Google kind of looks at those parameters too, to see how valuable your site is. This is another option, this is just another tool for with content, and I'm not selling any kind of product here, I just pulled a screen of something from online. But if you're also thinking, gosh, we don't even know what to write about or what's important to people, when you have a pop-up tool like this, like a chat tool or a pop-up box that people are able to kind of submit questions or queries, that's another way for you to get data about things that you might want to write about. So that's just another consideration as far as how do we, what are some of the things that people might be interested in or they need to know about us. That can just be another kind of a toolkit. And if you look around and you look for free chat software or free, some free surveys, I mentioned the surveys earlier on, that these are more tools for gathering what you need. Okay, so another one that I like is just kind of figuring out, what are we about? I don't even know what we want to write about. And this is just a good statement if you're getting started with a content marketing strategy and you're trying to think, well, I don't even know what do we need to tell people? Is that if you can answer the question, your audience and your topic and your problem. Right, so we're a resource for marketing professionals who are interested in copywriting and want to get found in SEO results, right? So this is just a way for you to kind of think about how you want to convey what it is that you do. Okay, anybody here, I'm curious just if somebody wants to watch for just a second for chat, if anybody can tell me who their audience is. Do you know if it's businesses? Is it women over 50? Is it men in their 20s? I'm just curious, so I'll just watch this just for a second to see if anybody has identified who their audience is. Okay, so we've got some business to business, high-tech men. Okay, that's great, so you know who your audience is. Anybody else? Business. Okay, I've got more business to business. Prospective students and their parents. That's great because that's two audiences. You've got the students who maybe want one thing and the parents who want another thing. So that's great. So that's good to know kind of what you're looking for. So one of the strategies is to maybe try to write to one. So My customer is a prospective student, and they're worried about academic success, and they need, so you kind of think through who they are and what they need. We are writing to a high-tech audience, and they probably need to find information very quickly, or so that's just some ways to start thinking about your audience and asking those kinds of questions to define who you're writing to. So the consumer journey, I had mentioned you have people in different stages. And so this is really pretty much self-explanatory, but I want to highlight a couple things here. So interest, again, sticking with webinars, I'm looking for, I need a webinar, I need to find an online class on something, so they have some kind of interest. Or I have an interest, I need to buy a new desktop computer and I don't even know, I don't know what brand or who I should buy from. And so they go through these stages. So when they're interested, you want to educate them, just on here, this is who we are and this is what we can do for you. But then it doesn't stop after they make the decision and they make the purchase. Then it's still, you're getting feedback, or you're still nurturing them as a client, because obviously you want them to come buy from you again. So you want to be invested in their journey and talk to them through these different stages. So kind of the getting started, and I alluded to some of that already, but the kind of the steps I see is the first is, defining the purpose. So, and one of the problems that I have found, I've seen this with some clients, is their purpose might say, well, because Instagram is a really popular channel right now. Well, so that's not really your purpose so much, because even if Instagram's a popular channel, it might not be the right channel for you. And that's you kind of have to back up a little bit more. So the purpose really goes back to, who are we and what's our message? And that can either be like some of the things that people had commented on here as far as who their audience is. Could be going through that mission statement to think about who you are, what you want to write about. Of course, understanding the audience. So again, we've got some different audiences here. Excuse me. Sorry about this. So with the different audiences, this is where, we have where they are purchasing. So whether they're considering if they're considering a purchase, what they might want to see is a table of benefits. What are they going to get for their money? If your audience already made a purchase, what they might want is a short YouTube video that demonstrates how the product is used, right? So you've got to understand what they're there for. Of course, telling your story. Probably for most of us, our corporate history is not going to be very interesting to most people. So when I say tell your story, that's not what I mean. But what I mean is what's interesting about your business or sets you apart, as a school or a B2B or a tech company. What sets you apart? Part of telling your story doesn't have to be you telling the story. So it could be your customer testimonials, maybe. Excuse me again, I apologize. So if your customers can help tell your story, why they like you or why they buy from you, that's more credible than, just you telling it. So now with the channels, this is when we get back to the, not saying we need to be on Instagram, but if our audience is women over 50, men under 30, or, so when you're thinking about channels, think about the demographics. Are they not going to read email, but they'll respond to text messages? So this is when you start to think about that piece. Of course, recent and relevant, and then your resources. So if you're a small company, you might not have the capacity to do a weekly e-news and be on 5 channels. So you need to think about what's actually something that's actually doable for you. I'm going to throw out another question. Where do some of you get ideas for your content? So I'll take just a second and watch that. Like, how do you know, or how do you get ideas for what you want to write about? Okay, that's good. So someone being said, their customers' needs, so it's great not, we're sitting here in our offices, this is what we think people need, but hearing from your customers. Okay, somebody mentioned curating. That's good. I want to mention that today too. That's where you're kind of using some of other people's content, not copying, but you're sharing some of the highlights that you found. Yeah, success stories from customers. That's a great one because again, that they can sell you better than you can sell you. And so it sounds like for this group, sounds like you already have, based on what I'm seeing here, a lot of you have ideas on how you're doing it. This is a big one is somebody said here with the customer needs, what are they asking you? And you can, another thing that's helpful with ideas is with that search console data that I mentioned. Another thing is if you have a search box on your website and people can type in a search if they're trying to find something and you have that set up in your Google Analytics, you can start to see what things people are looking for when they get to your site, and then that can also give you some ideas on what you might want to write about with your content. Just some other ideas here. RSS feeds, of course, following some of the top blogs. Just so, again, so you know what's recent and current. LinkedIn groups, Google Alerts, YouTube, of course, things from subscriber profiles. I gave the example of having that chat box on your site where people can submit questions. So lots of different ways to build ideas. The editorial calendar, this is so hard to do. You get so just focused on just go, go, go that it can be kind of tough to really say, well, let's sit down and go through this. But this really can be helpful, especially if you want to repurpose content. So if you're putting something that was, you had your email newsletter go out and it covered these 3 things today, then maybe a day a week, for the next few weeks, you can take pieces of that on your Facebook or Twitter or something. So this is it's, again, I admit it's kind of hard to do because I know I just jump in and kind of go, but this is helpful, especially if there's multiple people working on it, or again, you want to repurpose content is where a calendar can come in handy. Some of the things that work well. So somebody said curation, which is great. I'm glad to see that you're doing that. Of course, the frequent posting, the headlines. I'm going to show you a little neat tool here at the end that can help you with generating some good headlines. And the other thing is sometimes the best measure of success or what works well or what should we be doing is what you're seeing really in your Google Analytics account, right? So if your Monday story, that those articles, you find that every Monday people's absorbing that, and 10 a.m. on Monday mornings, because then you can get into analytics as far as the day and the time, but you find out that people are just never reading your stories on a certain channel or a certain time of the day. So that's another metric, is when you're starting to measure, you can look at that information. And this is one I did a while ago, human interest provocative headline. So my proposed question, I think the answer is one that we can probably all agree on. So sometimes when you have just a human interest story and something that people think, well, of course, of course they're too young to marry, you can get a lot of activity there. Again, the curations, that was already been mentioned, and this is really what you're doing is you're either organizing, summarizing, editorializing. So one thing, whether with organizing is you can have your top 5 resources for, and then you mention something, or you're summarizing, like I said, maybe an event summary that you were at and you were writing up the summaries of what the speakers were saying about. So that's a way that you can curate content, which can be definitely can be a time saver. And I'll keep going here and I'll show you the couple sites that I kind of like. So one, of course, Huffington Post. They aggregate a lot of content from other sites if you look at what they have on there. They invite bloggers to guest posts. So depending on your business, that could be a strategy where you're inviting people to submit guest posts. They have so much content on there, so they're constantly showing up in search results, and they're kind of in tune, of course, with what's happening on Daily Trend. With Starbucks, I thought this was interesting because when you look at the images here, you'll see that the drink is part of the story, right? So you see these different cups of coffee or drinks or but whatever else somebody else is holding, but they make it into a story. It's not just a cup of coffee. So they've been able to do something creative with images. Again, here's an example, Huffington Post, and this is just curating. You can see they've got just a ton of content they do on there. And then Target is another one that's interesting. So they are showing, just a variety of products, so different things to try to get people engaged. And it makes sense for a business like this to have a Pinterest account because it's, very visual. I'm just curious, this one I want to just throw that out, very visual. I'm just curious, this one I want to just throw that out there. I'm curious if anyone else has ever noticed a site, or even if your own site that you find where they're doing really great with images, like I kind of showed with Starbucks or with Target, Starbucks especially. Kohl's does a good one. Okay. Yeah, and so so just from what I'm seeing here, so with the retail, that makes sense. Okay, Gap and Old Navy, those are interesting too. And I find too with businesses that are very experiential, they're selling experiences too. If they can show pictures of that, that's a way to get people engaged. So let me talk about some of the mistakes before I get into the measurement. And these are ones we've probably all done. It's easy to do, right? Making it about you. So if we say, well, we offer excellent service, so you should, and that's assumed that you should do that, but what are the things that are going to appeal more to your customers, or what I had mentioned earlier, and I see that somebody had commented using the customer tutorials or reviews, because their word's going to be a lot more than your opinion. The jargon, this is one that I've caught myself in quite a bit, is that I will say SEO, PPC, and my clients are, I've gotten much better at it, but they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, and you have to even sometimes go in a little further than you think you needed to originally. So here's give me an example of this. So with SEO, clients are like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'll say, well, SEO, is search engine optimization. And even then, what is search engine optimization? That doesn't mean anything. So, I will break it down, and this is the traffic that you can get online that you don't have to pay for, right? So, and that makes sense because what they want to know, ultimately what it comes down to, is that none of my clients are interested in search engine optimization. They're interested in getting on page one of the search results, right? So you've got to really kind of drill into what you're doing. Doing everything manually is just impossible. I think that with social media, you don't want to just constantly spit stuff out there and not have a conversation with people. But I do think it's okay to schedule stuff out there if you're using multiple channels. With the sharing content one time, I alluded to that a little bit, that if you put out an email newsletter today, you could have something that you want to pull from there for maybe your Facebook or your Twitter accounts next week. So be, willing to repurpose that content, because that's going to take a lot of stress off of you. So, and this comes down to the so what, right? So if you're not measuring your conversion, so everybody downloaded our white paper, so they entered their email address and they downloaded the white paper from our site, but when we followed up with them, none of them converted. Or, they read our content, came to the site, and they filled out the lead generation, but none of them converted. So you're using your content to begin these conversations, but ultimately you want them to convert and, show me the money, right? So you want to be able to get some income there. And then thinking about your title, your title that's the whole reason people are going to decide whether or not that they're going to read your content. And again, I'll show you a little tool for that that's very helpful. And then, the SEO is paying attention to, if you just type Google algorithms in a search result, you'll see some of the things like talk about, like panda, penguin, hummingbird, and whatever else they might have come up with in the last, half hour that we've been talking together. So just there's some things to be aware of, that some common mistakes. Of course, some of these general tips is pretty, is you want to be conversational. And the kind of the key thing here I want to point out is having a clear action step, a call to action, right? So after you read this content, I want you to sign up for my webinar. After you read this content, I want you to download our white paper. after, you know what I mean? So ultimately your goal is you want to have people convert. You want to have something that's going to be engaging enough for them to convert. Again, images, if we're not able to get into this today, I have these here for your reference. Images, you want to be careful that you're not um, violating a copyright for someone. So you can, just be careful when you're looking around for images and it indicates that or not. But this is really important, even if whether you're doing like an Instagram or Pinterest or image-based site, or even in your email newsletter, that people are going to look. Images just really pull people in. So that's really important to include in your content. Okay, so let me mention testing. So I'll go ahead right in here with the testing of some of the things that you might want to test. So the headlines, of course, is the content, or that I mentioned that you might want to do in a paid ad originally. So your titles, your headlines are what going to draw people in or not draw them in. Your offers, your call to action. If I say sign up versus learn more, what's the difference there? The different types of media, and we talked about that at the very beginning. If you have text or even images or you have a webinar, and then frequency, you want to be, again, realistic depending on your team. Is it weekly, monthly, quarterly? And then the platforms, by platforms, I'm talking about your email, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, the platforms that are going to make sense for you. This is just another one, if you're trying to cut down on what you're writing, you think you've got too much in there. This is a test where you can kind of remove, if you want to look this up, if you're interested in exploring a little more, where you're moving portions of text to see if it still makes sense once you remove it. And that kind of what that does is that helps you with your wordiness. So you're removing words, from a sample and then seeing if you rely on the context that you can identify what came out of there. So if you want to find out, so that's just another tool if you're finding that your writing is maybe it feels too wordy to you. This is just a test that kind of helps you see how you're doing there. Okay, so we'll talk in measurement. Now, Google Analytics, if you wouldn't mind, just while I'm pulling this up, would you put a note in there just that if you're familiar with Google Analytics, yes or no? Just so I'm kind of curious how familiar people are with that. So if you just put yes or no, I'm getting in there. So this, obviously, it's not a Google Analytics class. That's something that's a whole other topic. But the measurement is important. Okay, so I see some people familiar, some not familiar. One thing I encourage you to do when you get off of this webinar today is, I'll get to this measurement here in a second, but I do just need to get this in here because I see this issue quite a bit, is that I've had people say, we have Google Analytics, but I haven't looked at it in 6 months. So the reason I want you to go and look at your analytics or make sure it's installed today is that sometimes I've seen stuff where analytics either wasn't installed correctly or there might have been a website update and it turns out it wasn't recording data. So the reason I say this is even if you think I have no idea about Google Analytics, I don't have time for this, I have too many other things to do, as I always encourage people just to at least get it installed and at least make sure it's working and then look at it down the road, so you're collecting this data so then you're going to be able to use that at a later date. So I think that's just really important for you to have the analytics in there. So of course, some of the things you're measuring, so you have kind of your soft metrics, maybe kind of harder metrics. So like a soft metric, if they're, 10 page views or 2 minutes on the site or, 3 pages. So kind of softer ones, but obviously, direct sales, that's an obvious. If they're buying something, you're doing well. Your lead generation. So are they filling out the form? Are they downloading the paper? And then referral traffic. So have we been able to get those links that are sending people to our site? A couple other things I want to highlight. So for those of you who are already pretty familiar with analytics, this is going to be very brief. And for those of you who are not, this is just kind of highlight some things that you might want to look at later on. But one is the geography. And this is a screenshot from an analytics account for the audience and their location. So it can be helpful to know where your readers are. So if when you know where your content's being read, maybe that can help you understand your market, are people from a certain part of the country or outside of the country? And if you're open to serving other geographic areas, then you know this if you're doing some paid advertising where you'd want to allocate some of your budget. The other thing also is time, and I mentioned that you can see how many page views or their time on page, and this is with their behavior and analytics. So if you're a content site like Huffington Post, that would obviously be important to know, but you also want to know if you're writing a 1,000-word piece and people are on it for 3 seconds, ooh, that's kind of an indicator that maybe that's not what they're absorbing. But if you're writing longer pieces and people are spending 10 minutes on there, then that time can kind of tell you if you're speaking to your audience the way that they want to be talked to, with short pieces of content or longer pieces. A share is more meaningful than a like, so if I like your content, then I'm just telling you that I like it. But if I share it, then I'm helping you get the word out there and telling other people that I like it. So there's a number of different widgets out there, such as Add This or this Shared Count. What Shared Count will do is let you track metrics across your different marketing efforts, to see shares. So that's just another thing. If you do not have this capability on your website, again, go back to your webmaster and just ask if there's a way we can put a social sharing, or what it might be called in many cases, a widget, on your site so you can start to measure that. And then, of course, the inbound links, which are so hard. I think they're challenging to earn, but this is the Search Console, and connect that with the Google Analytics, and you can see the inbound links to your site. So if people are linking to you, that should be a pretty good sign that you have good content. So this is something that you want to watch. And of course, you can see your links in analytics as well. I mentioned conversions. Again, this is more in analytics, but something that you would want to watch in there to make sure that people are converting. And if a conversion is not a straight dollar because you're not buying on your site, you might want to know how many people are completing a form. Okay, so I want to mention these kind of final takeaways, and then what I'm going to do, I've got a couple minutes before we go into questions, but I want to show you some of the tools that I referenced today. So it's good to audit it, and audit that. It's not this big complicated process, but kind of auditing, and I see that going along with measuring. If people are not reading, any of your articles, but they're all looking at your videos, then you know that videos may be a better route for you than your longer articles. I see from the comments here today, this group is customer focused, which is great. What do they want, not what do I want? Making sure it fits the channel. So if you're on LinkedIn, I see some of this occasionally on LinkedIn that somebody's slamming someone else because they're putting Facebook type comment on there. So like the comment or the cartoon I showed at the beginning, maybe that would be more appropriate for Facebook than for LinkedIn. So are you fitting your channel? So let's do this, and then we'll come back to the Q&A. So let me just make sure that you can see my screen. Give this just a minute. Okay. Okay, everyone, I'm sorry, just bear with me. I'm having a little trouble here sharing my screen. Okay, and I don't think I can see that I'm sharing, but I don't think everybody can see it. If you would just maybe put a note in there if you're able to see, I've got a Search Console screen up. No. Oh, shoot. Of course, this worked when we were testing, and then now that I've got people on the call here, it seems to maybe not be working. Just try this one more time. I want to just show you some of the tools. Again, I'll just kind of keep talking while this is hopefully maybe going to come up here. So again, kind of the tools, the external tools I mentioned to help you, again, is the Google AdWords keyword tool, right? So again, this is you don't need to have AdWords in order to use the tool. Oh, there we go. Okay, although my screen resolution is a little weird. Okay, well, I apologize for the difficulties here, but let me just at least show you. And again, I know the screen resolution is a little bit of a mess, but what I'm showing you right now is this is, I know, and I realize you can only see part of this. So the Search Console, I'm in a Google Analytics account. And when you see this option, so if you go into your Google Analytics account and you are looking at your, kind of scroll down here so you can see a little bit, the acquisition, and then you see this word here, get this on the screen, Search Console. So when you go into Google Analytics and you go to Search Console and then landing pages, queries, if you see a screen like I have on this particular account, it just means that it's not set up. If it's something you want to set up, you can just click and it'll kind of take you through the steps. It's pretty easy to do. But again, I encourage you to do that so you can get some of that keyword data. Once that's set up, it'll look more like this screen, which is coming up. What I am doing here is I'm actually in a Search Console screen, right? So if, again, we don't have time to really delve into this today, but what this is doing is it's going to let you start to see some of the keywords that people are searching that got them to your website. Okay, the other quick thing I want to show you, I know I'm kind of running out of time here, but I want to just show you how to use this if you're not familiar with AdWords. So what you would do here along the top, so I'm in an AdWords account. When I choose Tools, then I have the option of Keyword Planner. So again, you don't need to pay any money to AdWords in order to use this tool, but this is, you can see here, different options for doing some of your keyword searching. And then finally, this one I really like. It's you see that's Portent Tools. It's a title maker. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, yeah, with the resolution, I might not be able to show you, but let me just explain what that does. Is if you come here and you just enter a topic that you need to write about, this is just a little free tool. And what it does, it's going to try to help you think of your headlines, like 10 ways to do this now, or 5 things you should never do, or, so it's going to just try to just put in your subject. And then when you go ahead and refresh, and again, it's tools, it's free, and you can get to it at this Portent site I have up on the screen. And then that'll help you to try to, if you're kind of stumped on a good headline or a good title for your content. Okay, so apologize about the screen resolution. It's not quite right, but hopefully this at least, you can at least see these tools so you know some of the things that you might want to experiment with a little bit. Okay, so since I've got about 1:50, so I went a minute or two over, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this back to Andrea for any of the questions that I can answer for you today.
Thank you, Tina. I would now like to take your questions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box in the bottom left corner of your screen. The first question asks, should we mainly focus on adding content to our own site or publish it on other sites?
I think both can be a great idea. The reason you would want to do it on your own site, because that's, of course, because you own it, and so that's where you'd want to have a lot of your real estate are, because eventually you want people to come back to your site and make a purchase. What's helpful, though, if you are not well known, you're a new business or you're just getting started, you might want to put some content out on other publishing sites, or maybe somebody will let you do a guest post so you can maybe find a new audience to drive people back. So I think writing the content for both is actually a good idea.
Can you recommend a good editorial calendar tool?
Yeah, you know what I tend to use for that is I'm a big fan of Google Docs, and so that's not, a professional editorial tool. But the reason I like that is I'll do a Google spreadsheet, date, channel, post, that kind of thing, especially because I do a lot of remote work. And so it's nice when you have a team that you're working together to put your content out there that everybody can get on and share that pretty easily. So that's why I like to use a Google spreadsheet as my editorial calendar.
We post content on social media, but do not receive a lot of traffic from it. Should we also pay for posts to get our content out there?
Yeah, unfortunately, one thing I've heard a lot with Facebook now is that people reference it as pay to play. So you're putting something on your business's Facebook page, but that doesn't mean that anyone's going to see it. Since Facebook kind of decides what to show or not to show. So I think it's a good idea if you're not getting a lot of reception for a particular piece of content, and you put it on Facebook and it's organic and people just, they're just not clicking on it, that you might want to pay for, maybe just put $5 into a post for a promoted post and see how you do. So Facebook's not, again, this is from my experience, I don't find that Facebook has been a great tool for customers, but if you need to maybe do some branding, that if you put a few dollars in here or there, that you can get your content out there. But a lot more, I'm finding that clients are saying that they're having to pay on Facebook to be able to get enough eyeballs on what they're writing.
What is an ideal word length for a blog
So
post?
for what I thought for the longest time is that a good length for a blog post would be like maybe 200, 300 words because nobody has time to read anything lengthy anymore. But for a couple clients that I've done freelance writing for, they want content. I have one, they want 700 words, and I have another one that I've been writing for, they want 1,000 words. So I guess in terms, what I'm discovering or assuming is that in terms of the content, is that maybe if Google's giving more credibility to my 800 word post compared to my 300 word one, so that maybe it's more discoverable online and then it's more people consuming it. But I've been hearing that pretty consistently, and that's been kind of surprising to me. But I still do that, I still aim for longer because this is what I'm being told that gets the best response.
Do you have a good tool for analyzing SEO results for content?
So let's see. So analyzing SEO results for content, and if I'm misunderstanding this question, please repeat it in case I'm not getting it right. But if you're looking at like looking at what's happening on SEO to decide what you want to write about, one thing that you can do, let me see if I can get back over here to my screen sharing a second. So this will pause a minute, but one is you've probably seen this with if you're on google.com, that you start to type in a word and you'll get that auto suggest. So you can see this a little bit on my screen here. I realize it's showing on the bottom right of yours, but if I say webinar and then I start to see the words that people are typing, so that's where I can see words that are popular. Or if I go ahead and finish a search in terms of, looking at what to use for content, I'm seeing the amount of research, or I'm sorry, the amount um, that this word is showing up in the SEO results. Another one, let me mention this. So Uber Suggest is another tool if you're wanting to see kind of what's coming up that people are interested in. If you just say, if I just say webinar and then I do suggest, and you're not going to see all these results, but then what it's going to do is it's going to show me some of the potential words to use for writing. So the Uber Suggest and the just doing that Google suggests is to try to, see how I am and to find ideas in terms of content, and then to see how I'm doing organically. And then if that's what you're thinking of in terms of with the SEO results, is when you go into Google Analytics, and I'll come back over here for a minute. If you're in Analytics and you're looking at channels, and then while this is loading and you look at your organic search, that kind of helps you see how you're doing organically. So if that's what you're wondering too, in terms of how your site traffic is, that you go in here and you go to your channels, and then you would continue scrolling down on here for organic. So if that wasn't quite the question or answer to your question, please feel free to clarify. I don't want to make sure I'm answering what everybody needs.
You mentioned LinkedIn. Is it important for businesses to post content and also interact on Facebook?
I have, again, trying to tell you my own biases here, is that I think LinkedIn is very important for staying active, interacting with people, putting content, because I've been able to get new business from there, that people have seen my posts and stuff I write about with online marketing, and they've kind of just discovered me that way. I have mixed feelings about Facebook. I think it seems to be very much, baby pictures and cat videos and people fighting about politics. So what I will occasionally do is on my business page, which I kind of regret setting up because I don't ever really want to use it, I occasionally will post something on there about a new article I wrote. But I don't, I just think business owners, and it depends. It depends too on your industry. If there's nothing really lighthearted about your industry, then, Facebook may not be the right place for you, but LinkedIn might be better for you as far as interacting with professionals. But LinkedIn might be better for you as far as interacting with professionals.
That was the last question. If you did not have an opportunity to ask your question, please email your question to ahall@pbp.com, and our client relations specialist will be glad to respond. I'll now turn it back to you, Tina, for closing remarks.
Okay, great. Thank you. I know I had a lot of information here for you today. I would just encourage you, you have a copy of the slides, go back to some of the tools that I mentioned and think about, to give you some ideas on what are we going to write about, and also encourage you to look at some of the demographics for the different social media channels out there, since social media is a big deal for content, but you may or might not, have the right audience there. So that's definitely worth, investing in, and just making sure you're talking to the right people. But thank you again. I appreciate everybody coming on here today.
Thank you, Tina. Progressive Business Executive Education would like to thank you for attending today's webinar. If you would like to purchase a recording of this conference, you may do so by calling 800-964-6033 or by using the enclosed order form. We would also like to encourage you to complete and return the evaluation form to us. On behalf of Progressive Business Executive Education, I would like to thank you for attending the webinar. This concludes our program.